Welcome, everyone. We are about to start the service. Just a friendly reminder to silence your cell phones.
My dear friends, we come together today to give kavod acharon, final honor, to Philip L. Stahl, Pinchas Leib, Ben Shlomo Halevi, Vefega Batya, beloved father of Marcy and Philip Manashor, devoted grandfather of Chava Manashor and Yael and Netanel Weinstein, great-grandfather of Leora, Liba, and Zev, brother of Stanley and Yvonne Stahl, and Alice and Sherwin Littman, uncle and great-uncle to many, friend and community member. We will begin today's service with a recitation of a chapter of Tehillim, a chapter of Psalms. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echsar, binotesha yarbitzeni, al mei menuchot yinahaleni. Nafshi yeshovev yancheni b'magle tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech b'geit salmavet lo irara, ki ata imadi. Shiftecha umishantecha hema yinachamuni. Taroch lefanai shulchan neged sorarai. Tishanta vashemen roshi kosi rivaya. Ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai. V'shavti b'veit Adonai la'orech yamim. A psalm of David, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He lets me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restoreth my soul, guiding me along the right paths for the sake of God's name. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff encourage me. You set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup brims over. May only goodness and kindness follow me all the days of my life, and let me live in the Lord's house forever. I have the privilege of sharing Philip Stahl's basic biographical information. This is a severely abridged version of an incredibly full and robust and rich life. And I'm sure that Marcy and the rest of the family will be happy to fill you in on the details that were originally left out of this essay, and maybe some that were left out because of me. Philip Leonard Stahl was the son of Saul Stahl, who was born in Austria, and Bessie Kessler, the oldest of four daughters from Chicago. Saul and Bessie were married in August of 1929, and Phil was born on July 14th, 1930 in Dallas, Texas. He was the oldest son, and you could tell from the photos that he was an adored first child with three aunts who doted on him. Phil's brother Stanley followed 4 years later, and Alice 4 years after that. Phil was 9 when the family moved to Roswell, New Mexico. Saul took over a dry goods store, and the family lived in the back of the store. Those were very different times. These were the Depression years. The family then moved to Denver shortly before Phil's bar mitzvah in 1943. Phil had an early morning Monday bar mitzvah, the basic package, as it was called. According to family lore, the bar mitzvah consisted of Phil chanting short prayers, introducing the Torah portion, accepting mazel tovs, watching the men down a glass of schnapps, eating some sponge cake, and going home. There's a wonderful picture of Phil in his talit with Saul looking extremely proud outside Zera Abraham on the west side. The Stahls lived in a duplex at 1562 Julian Street, and the phone number was Dexter 36744. The family loves their history and remembered the phone number. There were synagogues on every street. Phil and Stanley slept in a bed in the dining room, and Alice slept in her parents' room. The house burned coal for heat. Somehow Phil managed to have Stanley do most of the cold chores. Is that true? In January 1944, at the age of 37, Saul was drafted into the Army for about 9 months. When he was gone, Bessie sold hosiery, and Phil went to work at Gilbert's mom and pop grocery store to stock and as a delivery boy to bring in a few dollars. He was able to save up and get his own bicycle, which needed special papers because metal rationing was in full force, and he needed to prove that he needed the bicycle for his job. Penny Sunshine, friends since they were 12 years old, and Jerry Feld remained close his whole life. Later, Phil went to West High School, where he was popular. Phil and friends went skiing for the first time in Winter Park, along with Alice. Phil was still skiing at Winter Park into his 90s when he took Chava, into his 60s, excuse me, into his 60s. None of you corrected me. When he took his granddaughter Chava, who was 6 at the time, by train to ski together, and it was a very wonderful and cherished early memory of hers. Phil attended the University of Denver from 1949 to 1950. He enlisted as a private in the U.S. Army in March of 1951 and was sent to Kazumi, Japan, and was assigned the job as a secretary and transcriber in the 343rd General Hospital. Army photos show a handsome, well-kept soldier. He was honorably released from active duty in February of 1953 with the rank of corporal. After his return, he attended University of Colorado in Denver and studied business for 2 years, but never graduated because, in his own words, school wasn't for me. Phil worked at Dave Cook's Sporting Goods for a time. In 1955, Phil married Annette Sugi Sugarman at the Alliance and borrowed her brother's car for their honeymoon. Phil sold furniture, upholstery, and anything that he could sell, door to door, and Sugi worked at the JCC. After their day jobs, they would manage a self-service laundromat on 17th Street, and after a full day of work, they would go every evening to collect the quarters from the machines. Phil and Sugi also recorded weddings onto records, keepsakes many families still have to this day. These years were lean but happy. It wasn't until 1964 that Phil started Factory Outlet, a furniture store, and later also an appliance store. Phil grew the company from a tiny building on Alameda to 3 adjacent stores and a warehouse in the old Piggly Wiggly building on Market. He started with 1 employee, and it grew to 55 between the years of 1964 through 1976, when he eventually sold the business. It was one of the largest discount furniture companies in Colorado at the time, and Phil was an incredibly successful businessman. Marcy was born in April of 1959. While the number of children Phil had remained at 1, he was blessed with 6 wonderful nieces and nephews: Anique, Stephen and Erica, Jay, Michael and Alan. The locals, Anique and Erica, and even Stephen from Durango, were all able to be by their Uncle Phil's bedside with him just last Sunday. There were also 4 couples: the Lessers, the Gorkins, the Greens, and the Stahls. They were always fishing, 4th of July mountain weekends, barbecues, and fun for children and adults alike. After selling the Factory Outlet in 1976, Phil semi-retired at the very young age of 46. He was employed by Moore & Company from 1978 to 1982, selling commercial real estate. And Phil was a Shriner for over 50 years and a high achiever for his support of the Allied Jewish Federation and the United Jewish Appeal, and was a member of his BMH Chavurah for years. But golf was the activity he loved most. A Green Gables membership allowed him to simultaneously improve and be frustrated with his golf game. Phil's other passion, of course, was travel. He traveled to India, Russia, China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Japan, Holland, England, France, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, Greece, Morocco, Italy, Belgium, Czechoslovakia, Spain. I cannot pronounce this one. Seychelles, thank you. Israel, Jordan, Egypt, Kenya, Tanzania, Mexico, Panama, the Caribbean, Canada, and all over the United States. Phil almost made it to his 95th birthday, which would have been on July 14th of this year. To close with this part of Phil's life, I will read part of a letter from Bernie Naaman of blessed memory and Berta, given to him on an unnamed birthday that was saved for him for reasons that will become clear. This letter is on Naaman Investment Company stationery. Dear Phil, we wish you a very happy birthday with many more to come. A material gift is soon forgotten, but a letter from the heart endures for a long time. So I want you to know that this is from our heart. As I have observed you these past years, I have seen a man who is a real mensch. You are a true person for all seasons. You have worked hard and earned an enviable reputation. Because of your high standards, you make others better by being around you. We have to strive harder to keep up with you. You are totally honest. As Lou Nasbarg once said about playing golf, you are one of a very few that he never has to count strokes. I truly believe that you really only want good things for your friends, and you excel when they get them. Jealousy is not in your makeup. You are a person who has shown a vast amount of loyalty. Why else are you still friends with everyone that you grew up with? Your love and commitment to family is another virtue. When I ask about your children, your eyes light up and a smile always appears. So what have I missed? You are ethical, honest, loyal, charitable, a loving father and grandfather. In fact, you are one fine gentleman. You should always know the high esteem this community holds you in. You are honored for all that you are and for all that you have been. And we are honored to be your friends. Love, Berta and Bernie.
I'm Yael. I'm one of his granddaughters. Talking today feels really overwhelming because how can I possibly put into words the love that I've felt for Papa my whole life, or how much I'm going to miss him for the rest of it? But one of Papa's guiding lessons to me was that 90% of success is just showing up. So here I am, Papa, showing up for you like you always showed up for us. Papa had a captivating spirit. His joy for life was genuine and infectious, so rare and so beautiful. And it wasn't because life was always easy for him. As you heard, Papa was a self-made man. He started with almost nothing and built his life with grit, passion, gratitude, and relentless determination. He never let hard times harden him. Instead, he faced them with a smile and a plan. He inspired me, not just with what he accomplished, but with the way he appreciated every step along the way. He started his furniture business selling door to door, and from that humble beginning, he built something lasting, not just a successful career, but a life filled with love and meaning. Whenever I was having a hard time, Papa used to say, "Honey, you just have to keep knocking on those doors." That phrase became one of his gifts to me. It reminded me to keep going even when it was hard. And oh, how he loved us. To Papa, Chava and I were his PLBs, his precious little babies. And we felt like it. He showered us with love, pride, and the kind of attention that made us feel like the most special girls in the entire world. He visited us constantly in Israel, so much so that he could literally give tourists directions around Talpiot. And when we spent our summers in Denver, those weeks became collections of perfect Papa moments: swimming, golfing, going to plays, having sleepovers, watching movies. Well, we knew Papa wasn't just resting his eyes because he was snoring, but Chava and I would watch movies. We went on so many adventures together: London, Jordan, Seychelles. Papa's deep curiosity and love of discovery were ironically paired with a constant and often comical concern for our safety. I'll never forget riding a camel in Jordan while Papa held on to me so tightly that I could barely breathe. That was his love, always wrapped in a little extra worry. As I grew older, I realized that Papa's worry was just another form of his love. Nothing I said could stop him from checking in on me, especially once I had kids. I'd get phone calls out of the blue. Where are the great grandkids? Are they all right? I'd reassure him that they were safe and gently tease him for doubting my parenting skills. He'd just laugh, ignore the joke, and be relieved that everyone was okay. That was Papa. It wasn't until I saw Papa with my own children that I truly began to grasp how much he loved me and how much love he had given me. His joy around his great grandkids was unmatched. His eyes would light up with pride and wonder that made my heart burst. Just last week, we visited him. The kids were eating Oreos around his bed and telling jokes, giggling, and I asked him to share some words of wisdom. I expected some deep 90-year-old life advice. He smiled and said, "Well, kids, I think you should steal milk bottles, sell them for a penny each, and buy yourself some candy." That was Papa, funny, mischievous, and full of heart. Papa, you are the goat of grandfathers. You were the most loving, joyful, and devoted grandpa anyone could ever hope for. You gave me a lifetime's worth of love, and it will carry me forever. I promise to honor that gift, to work hard, to raise the next generations of PLBs with care, and to live my life with the same gratitude and open-hearted joy that you taught me. And don't worry, Papa, I'll do it all very, very carefully.
Well, if you could do it. Okay. Um, as I give my dad the respect, the kavod he so deserved, please indulge me as my dad gave me a lot of thinking time these last several days. Before Factory Outlet was born, in 1959, Dad always said I was his real impetus in starting the store. He had to feed me. All of us seated near here know how crazy in love he was with me. He continuously showered me with love and support. Just a few days ago, he told me by his bedside that I was his favorite daughter. Dad, you only have one child, so that's not a really great achievement. According to him, I never caused him a day of trouble. Truthfully, I just think he thought I could do no wrong. It's a big loss to lose your biggest advocate. My childhood was idyllic. When quite young, I remember waking up early to have orange juice parties with my dad. He did spend a lot of time down at the store, and I spent a lot of time there as well. Both my grandfathers worked there, so did my uncle. It was a welcoming place. I'll never forget when he drove me around the night of the big flood in Denver in 1965. That flood actually made Dad's store a success because it was luckily on high ground and people received insurance money to buy the much needed furniture. Phil, Hava, El, and I would relish the nights you would tell us story after story from the store. The characters like Bubba Boykins, a very old lady you took me to visit as a child who, quote, paid her bills on time, or the truck drivers that would forget to close the back of the truck, leaving chairs or couches in their wake, made for the tales better than fiction. Sherry, my oldest and dearest friend from the age of 6, has known my dad almost as many years as I have. She remembers the two of us playing down at Factory Outlet. Who needed toys when we could play make-believe upstairs in the offices with large windows overlooking the showroom, quote, on Alameda? There were buttons to push and enough carbon paper contracts and receipts to fill our imaginations. And we used to give out turkeys that the store gave away before Thanksgiving. Sherry just said to my dad less than a week ago, as she lovingly sat with me by my bedside, by my dad's bedside, "I lived at your house growing up," she said to Dad. Even though weak, my dad replied, "I should have charged you rent." She remembers going out to many dinners, especially at the Apple Tree Shanty, and we both cherished the real school desk, the type that attached on one side that Dad brought home one day. When you take playing school as seriously as we did, it was magical. Sherry's sister Lisa even stored it in her basement when we moved to Israel. I had that desk until finally, 5 years ago, I sadly and reluctantly parted with it. Although I was clearly my mom's girl, and your marriage to mom was not a success, our family life was. We had dinners together most every weeknight. After dinner, Dad would sit down to a big bowl of popcorn. He wasn't as slim and trim as back then. We always had Friday night dinners, usually at my Booby and Poppy's. We'd have Sunday evening drives for the purpose of just going on a drive, and maybe an ice cream cone. He tried to teach me how to ride a bike, but couldn't stand the thought of me hurting myself. Thankfully, someone else did the teaching. Protective would definitely be a word to describe my dad growing up. But you were also an instigator of many things. You had a pile of black and white photos of surgeries you watched while in the army in Japan. These photos sparked my early interest in all things medical. You got me a microscope and slides that we still have to this day for the grandchildren. You helped me set up a full black and white photography developing studio in a closet of our basement, complete with the chemicals and trays, the black light, and the developer. Our home was always open and a gathering spot for friends and family. You randomly brought home a pinball machine one day. My friends loved playing with it, along with the requisite ping pong table and randomly a snooker pool table. We took many family trips, usually by plane because I was so carsick as a child. Wendy, my other dear friend who has known my dad well since our teenage years, remembers when she joined us on a family trip to Montreal and Quebec. He'd also take Wendy and me out to dinner often during our college days in Boulder and also in California when he'd come to visit me at grad school. Wendy and her husband Jim just loved spending time with Dad, and especially remarked about the last Purim when Dad and they were all together at our house in March. He will always be remembered for his generosity and genuine interest in others. In the last week, when he certainly had every right to be self-absorbed, he asked me how our dear friends Stu and Robin were doing. He was worried about the Snyders. Where were Wendy and Jim traveling on their cruise? How was Auntie Vaughn doing? Of course, over the years, she would send him homemade treats with Stanley, so that always hit a soft spot with Dad. Religiously, we had a kosher home, and Judaism was always a central traditional part of our lives. He belonged to the BMH for probably 60 years. While I would never call my dad religious, he really loved to be part of our Orthodox life in Israel and embraced it wholeheartedly. He didn't understand it, but was an active participant. The year following my bat mitzvah, my grandma died. Dad went to Minyan many of the days that year to say Kaddish, and Dad even went to a Hebrew tutor for the year when he took me to an algebra tutor. That shocked me at the time. Dad, I could have used those Hebrew lessons much more than the algebra ones, which I actually loved. Of course, once we moved to Israel, Yael would sit down in her school for many more Hebrew lessons. You really tried to learn and were always such a good sport trying to do all her intricate lesson plans. I found it interesting that among the things you saved were letters of Mizal Tov from Rabbi Wagner when each of your grandchildren were born. You weren't spiritual, but you were proudly a Jew. You knew who you were, and it was part of you naturally. And you were a Zionist. You probably had well over 18 trips to Israel, mostly our fault during our 7 years there. You would rent an apartment and stay at least 3 or 4 weeks at a time. You quickly became more like a resident than a tourist. Besides giving directions to everyone in Jerusalem, you knew the little Makolet man at the neighborhood grocery store, knew all our friends, and took classes when you visited. It was during your first visit after we made Aliyah that you taught us how to use our first computer. It was hysterically funny when none of us could figure out how to turn the damn thing off as it kept playing an Aladdin tune over and over. Sadly, during that first year, you were also in Israel during the shock of Rabin's assassination and for a lot of terror, but you never stopped coming, not during the Second Intifada either. You started a tradition of taking us to Eilat every Hanukkah, and you would stand for hours on the beach holding a gumi, or Chinese jump rope, around your legs on the beach so Hava and Yael could do their jumping. We all climbed up over 800 steps, counted by the girls, in Petra, Jordan. We traveled together to London from Israel one year and went to see Cats. You always loved musical theater. My dad has always cherished the two of you and your guide time in a London pub there. And I'm sorry, okay. And our trip to the Seychelles Islands is another story that will have to wait. You flew to Israel for Hava's many performances as Annie in Annie, and for all her plays with the Jerusalem English-speaking theater. And another favorite Papa story is that you like to walk with Hava to school in the mornings, about a 50-minute walk. Afterwards, you would stop to sit for a coffee in a hotel not far from her school. You heard two women speaking English getting out of the elevator, commenting on how wonderful that little Annie was last night at the theater. And I quote, "I just had to go tell them that that was my granddaughter." You were always the proud papa, and that was so like you. It was during your semi-retirement that you and Miffy Pepper became such very close friends. You both formed MMP, but your friendship extended way beyond that to being loyal and dedicated friends for life. Your funeral wouldn't be complete without mentioning Miffy and that you have missed Miffy dearly since he has been gone. You told me of dreaming of golfing with Miff. You missed him so much. I hope you're busy playing some rounds together right now, and you remain close with his wife Joanne for the years following his death. About the time you were selling real estate and playing golf, another Phil entered all our lives. Dad embraced his son-in-law, Phil, just like you embraced others that you love, with wide open arms. When Dad was still able, you enjoyed spending time together at Rockies games and CU basketball games and even rode your bikes together. If only Phil played golf. There was a respect and trust between you that was admirable. In the recent years, Phil took over many tasks for you. You always treated him more like a son than a son-in-law. That feeling was mutual. We always laugh about the time Phil came to ask you permission to marry me. You were so excited, you literally levitated off the couch. Talk about welcoming your son-in-law to be. What comes next is the addition of two of the most precious little babies in the universe, the PLBs, Hava and Yael. Adoration, adulation, devotion, caring, support, admiration, dedication to treasure, to delight, dedication to treasure, to delight, to cherish, to hold dear. Dad loved you both beyond words. And even when he was sick and weak, he would still light up when he would see you. It wasn't just in Israel that you made memories with him. We all have wonderful memories of our Glenwood Springs trips, Aspen for Dad's 75th, and your 80th birthday cruise to Alaska. Unfortunately, you taught us that one should never have a stroke on a cruise ship in the middle of nowhere. It was memorable. Your granddaughters got older, and there were graduations and trips to see Hava in San Francisco and New York City, to see both Hava and Yael. You were a very proud papa when you attended Yael's graduations and when you visited her in Eugene, Oregon, at the maternal fetal medicine clinic where she was a genetic counselor for 7 years. You would go anywhere to see what your kids were up to and to be part of their lives. Nathaniel, or as you first called him, that Nate, was immediately embraced as Yael and Netta married. Dad and Netta really appreciated and enjoyed each other. After the wedding, first came the grand dogs. Truthfully, Frankie's size was much too much for Papa. After his child helper in Dallas named Lala scared him with threats that you better be good or I'll get the dog. On the other hand, little Peyton became the only dog Papa truly came to enjoy. We even have pictures to prove it of Peyton sitting on Papa's lap. He even asked about Peyton during his last few days. Of course, Dad was not an animal lover in general. Never being allowed a dog as a child, I grew up having guinea pigs as pets. Sherry remembers when he shockingly agreed to my first one from Kmart. They somehow multiplied into 5 guinea pigs. He was not happy about this ever. Then, pivotal, pivotal for Papa's big heart came the next generation of precious little babies, PLB's Leora, Leva, and Zevi. He talks about them nonstop. He dreams about them. He worries about them, and he is absolutely crazy about them. His walls were filled with their pictures, and the movie he liked to watch over and over was his Photo Nix play, or as he randomly called it, his Norflix. Their last visit, they wanted to share Oreos with Papa and made sure to give Papa extra kisses goodbye. They filled his heart with immense joy. No words would describe his love for these little ones. I couldn't begin to try. You used to go to spin class. You were a regular at the health club. You rode a bicycle outside into your 80s. You learned to rollerblade so you could rollerblade with your granddaughters into your 70s. You were a Schwitz guy, the hotter the better, that morphed into the sauna at your health club. You loved to fish. You loved to eat. You had monthly lunch dates with old friends, too numerous to mention that I'm not going to try. You would help any friend in need and do it quietly. You loved nice clothes and nice shoes. You loved cars and bought me a few. The first was a Volare. The hardest thing, whoever heard of that? The hardest thing was when I had to take your car away. We kept seeing too many new dents and bangs when you would come over to our house on Ivy Street for Shabbat dinner every Friday night. Well, when you asked me to stop with you at a particular body shop on Leetsdale one day, and they came out to greet you with, "Hi, Mr. Stahl," and offered to fix that dent for free, I knew you were much too frequent and too good a customer. You loved to travel and traveled the world as discussed. You had a good life, a lucky life. You would say how remarkable it was that you lived the life you lived. You always wanted another birthday. You were a very happy and contented man. In your heart, you could have kept living and living. I think that is why dying was so very difficult for you. The last few years were hard. After you caught COVID and were hospitalized 18 months ago, you never really recuperated. You became immobile and life became much more difficult. Somehow we still got you to all the family get-togethers. In fact, it is hard to believe that you were at Yael and Netta's for our last family Shabbat dinner a little over 2 weeks ago. You even told us your last corny joke that night. You were so on as you delighted in all of us and us in you. Dad, I will miss our daily morning check-ins. I will miss all that time spent just chatting in your room. I will miss those many times when you let me cut your hair. The best, though, was when you actually let 7-year-old Leora and 5-year-old Leva use the electric razor and cut the back. They brushed you off so professionally. Papa loved manis and petties. He loved taking Hava any chance he got. Papa wanted and had a manicure during his final week of life. His dad Saul used to tell him, if you have a brand new suit and an old pair of shoes, you don't look good. Dad, that's why I'm wearing these shoes. And Dad, you would add the nails, your nails better look manicured too. You love halva, cherry pie, chopped liver, white fish salad, salami, and watermelon. You could nosh. You always liked your soup very hot. One of my jobs at your request was to buy you large quantities of cherry Coke. I actually think cherry Coke kept you going in the end. It was one of the last things you had. Hilltop Reserve, although too many to mention by name, the nurses and aides took such dedicated care of you. We appreciate all the little and big things they did every day and every hour up until the end. Stephanie, thank you for staying all those extra hours on a particularly precarious night. At Hilltop, you made so many wonderful friends. You'd often eat 3 meals a day together. Thank you also to Rocky Mountain Senior Care and Berkeley Hospice. I haven't yet mentioned Dad's sense of humor, but when a hospice nurse asked Dad if he was comfortable, he'd answer, "Well, I make a pretty good living." Honest to God. Um, Thank you to my Aunt Pudgy and Uncle Sherwin. You were frequent visitors and especially liked to bring Dad chicken sandwiches from Popeyes. You were both by his side until the very end. Sherwin's relationship with Dad was exceptionally close. Speaking of caring with love, being a witness to the brotherly love Stanley showed my dad in his final year was a beautiful thing to behold. Stanley would shave you every other day to make sure you looked your best. He kept you looking dignified and dapper, something of great importance to you. He just said to me that he was going to miss taking you to Shabbat services, the happy hour, to the movies with popcorn, the concerts, and all the lunches you shared. Uncle Stanley, you were always there. Stanley also once brought his chamber music group to play for all the residents at Hilltop. You exemplified the very best kind of brother. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. And speaking of love, there's Ruth Epstein. Around 1980, Juanita and Leonard Alterman introduced Dad to Ruth. You both lived at Candlewick. They went together for almost 10 years and took fabulous trips to China, Japan, Thailand, Hawaii, Israel, and the US. But Ruth didn't want to get married again, and after an unfortunate break for Dad of 22 years, they came together again for close to 15 years until the very end. You shared in each other's families, occasions, and life. After you became immobile, Ruth still made sure to come to you. Usually Ruth's daughters, Eileen and Becky, would bring Ruth, and you'd all have lunch together at Hilltop. She even tolerated your political views. She was the woman you gave your love to. We can't thank her enough for being a constant source of joy and support, dedicated to you always. There's Hava and Yael, who simply love their papa, and Phil, without whose love and support, I couldn't survive. And in the end, it was just me. I was there every step of the way, from my first baby steps until your last. You will leave a gaping hole in all of our lives.
We're going to conclude with another recitation of a chapter of Tehillim, followed by the memorial prayer. Before we conclude, I want to remind everyone that interment will take place immediately following this service at Rose Hill Cemetery. And the Shiva information is as follows. Shiva will take place at Marcy's home, 590 South Harrison Lane. And Shiva will commence immediately following burial. Services tonight are at 7:30 p.m. and Shiva tonight will conclude after services. Shiva tomorrow will begin at 2 p.m. Services again will be at 7:30 p.m. and Shiva will conclude tomorrow after services. So there are 2 days of Shiva, today and tomorrow. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai mi agorba halecha, mi yishkon behar kodshecha, holech tamim ufoel tzedek, v'dover emet bilvavo, lo ragala lishono, lo asa lireyehu ra'a, v'cherpa lo nasa al kirovo. Nivze be'enav nimas, v'yetirei Adonai yichabed, Nishba lahara v'lo yamir. Kaspo lo natan b'neshech. V'shochad al naki lo lakach. Oseh lo yimot le'olam. A psalm of David, Lord, who may dwell in your tent, who may live on your holy mountain. The one whose ways are blameless and who does what is right, who speaks truth from the heart, the one who has no malice on his tongue, who does no wrong to his fellow, who does not cast a slur against their neighbor, the one who scorns those who are vile, who honors those who fear the Lord, who keeps an oath even when it hurts, the one who does not loan money for interest, who does not take a bribe against the innocent. Anyone who acts thus will never be shaken. Please rise. El malei rachamim shochein b'maromim. Hamitzei menucha nechona tachat kanfei ashchina. B'malot kidoshim utehorim. Kizohar hakia mazhirim. Linishmat Pinchas Leib. Ben Shlomo Halevi. V'fega Batya. Shehalach li'olamo. Ba'avur shetein tzedakah b'yad haskarat nishmato. Bigan Eden tehe menuchato. Lachein balarachamim. Yasti rehu b'seter kinafav li'olamim. V'yitzror b'tzror achayim et nishmato. Adonai hu nachalato. V'yanuach b'shalom. Al mishkavo v'nomar amen. God, full of mercy, who dwells on high, grant fitting rest beneath the protective wings of the divine presence, where the souls of the holy and pure ones, whose radiance is like that of the heavens, reside, to the soul of Philip L. Stahl, Pinchas Leib, Ben Shlomo Halevi V'fega Batya, who has gone to his eternal reward, insofar as we will make a charitable gift in his memory. May the Garden of Eden be his resting place. For this reason, may the ever-merciful one shelter the deceased under God's protective wings forever, and may God bind his soul in lasting life, for the Lord will surely be his benefactor, so that he can rest in peace in his allotted place. And let us say, Amen. Please remain standing.
Thank you, everyone. That does conclude our service here at Feldman Mortuary. You're all welcome to join us for interment at Rose Hill Cemetery. We do not have a formally escorted procession, so you're welcome to try and follow the funeral coach and the family car. But just like we have to obey all traffic laws, you'll need to do the same, so please drive safely. There are directions to the cemetery in the handouts with the Shiva information. At this time, I'll ask guests to remain in their place while I escort the family back to their vehicle, and I'll have the pallbearers meet me at these back doors. My staff will help bring the casket this way, and then the pallbearers will help us carry the casket down the steps into the funeral coach. Thank you.